Welcome to the Innovation Ecosystem podcast. We interview remarkable and thought-provoking guests about innovation, leadership, and change in the world of business. Whether you're an executive or an entrepreneur, our objective is to help you and your organisation create an entrepreneurial culture, become more innovative, and better able to respond to change. Each week, we'll deconstruct world-class performance from the arenas of business, academia, science, and sports. Each week, you can expect key insights, fresh perspectives, and proven tools you can use straight away to make you more successful professionally and personally. With your host, Mark Bidwell.
Hello, my name is Mark Bidwell. Welcome back to the Innovation Ecosystem, and if this is your first time, a very warm welcome to the show. With me today is Tamara Kleinberg, who's a serial entrepreneur and innovator and founder of her own company, LaunchStreet. And in this interview, Tamara discusses the lessons that she's learned throughout her 20-year career in the innovation world, working with the likes of Disney, Procter & Gamble and Johnson & Johnson. And we explore what a people-driven approach to innovation means for leadership in large, established organizations, and how her company, LaunchStreet, provides tools and resources for teams, leaders, intrapreneurs and entrepreneurs to build the right behaviors for innovation. And she tells us her theory of the 9 different innovator archetypes and walks us through her Innovation Quotient Edge assessment tool that reveals your personal unique innovator archetype. And as it happens, I'm an inquisitive futuristic, and you can find out what this means by listening to the rest of the podcast. So welcome to the Innovation Ecosystem podcast. My name is Mark Bidwell, and with me today I've got Tamara Kleinberg, who's founder of LaunchStreet, a serial innovator and also an entrepreneur. So welcome to the show, Tamara.
I'm so thrilled to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, not at all. And you know, I guess before we get into a very interesting story based on your experience of working with companies like Disney and Procter & Gamble and the Army Research Labs, before we get into some of this stuff and more recently your new business that you've launched, maybe you can just sort of help me by, what do you answer how do you answer the question, what do you, the dinner party question, what do you do, Tamara?
Yeah, the dinner party question. I love it. Yeah, I just break it down in this simple way. I help people be more innovative. It is their greatest untapped asset. It's what gives people and then ultimately organizations the competitive edge. And that's what I do. It's all about, the human and being more innovative so that you can unleash that great power inside.
And when you say be more innovative, I mean, it sounds like this isn't just in the workplace. Is this more generally, as an individual in all aspects of one's life?
Well, my focus is very much on work and organizations, but the reality is, and I think, Mark, you've experienced this in your life too, when you are more innovative, it spans across everything. So that problem you're trying to solve becomes easier to solve. You work smarter, not harder. That opportunity you want to go after seems to be within reach. You start to see more opportunities and more ideas around you. So while my focus is, being more innovative and entrepreneurship and getting that into the workplace and doing it through people, the reality is it affects your whole life because, you don't shut off the minute you leave the office, do you?
Well, exactly, and I guess that was behind the question. I guess. I mean, yeah. and why is it? Particularly in the corporate world. I mean, as I mentioned earlier on, you work with the likes of Disney and Procter & Gamble, which are, very innovative companies, but they've also been around a long, long time. Why is it that it's such an important topic, and why do you feel it's continuing to remain an important topic? This innovation.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I've had the privilege of working with these, companies that you just mentioned who I think from the outside we would look at them and go, wow, they're very innovative to begin with. Then I also do a lot of work with organizations who are frustrated because they're not innovative or the marketplace is changing. And really to answer your question kind of head on, I would say that, and we had this conversation a little bit in our pre-call, the marketplace is changing, the customer is changing, the competition is changing, change is our reality. And if we're not continually being innovative, then what we're really doing is putting ourselves on a path to irrelevancy and being left behind. And, we see it time and time again where a company is at the top of its game to all of a sudden be obsolete and to be completely beat by a competitor it didn't see. I'll give you a very quick example without naming too many names, but I will say I worked with a very large cleaning company who was it in the marketplace in the US and probably around the globe actually, but definitely in the US. I mean, they're it. Like they are synonymous with cleaning. And this other company snuck up was $300 million before they even noticed it. So by the time they even realized the change was happening, it was too late. So what we're seeing is a need for innovation to be beyond that plaque on the wall. I mean, we as leaders talk about innovation. We give it a lot of lip service, but it's the organizations that really embed it into the company, into the mindset of the people, into the mandate of the job description that continue to stay ahead. But, sometimes when I keynote, I open up with a slide that has Sears, Kodak, Circuit City. I mean, if you look at these companies, they were top of their game. I grew up with these companies and now they're all but obsolete.
Yeah. I mean, there was some research I read the other day which said that 80% of CEOs, this was across 1,200 CEOs in large companies, felt that their products and services were going to be irrelevant in the next 3 years.
Yeah, how frightening is that? When you as a leader, that's, here's the thing. Here's how I kind of look at it. On one hand, it's frightening. On the other hand, what a great opportunity to be proactive and get ahead of the change. Here's my little thing. It's my little soapbox. I believe, and my experience has shown me that what we need to do in our organizations is create change artists, people who can take the change that is happening, whether we like it or not, it's out there, and actually mold it into something that turns into our greatest advantage. Change can actually work for us, but in order to do that, innovation has to be the norm. And, have you read that book, Good to Great by Jim Collins?
Yes, I have. Absolutely.
Right? Yeah. So it's one of those books that's considered, an icon in business. Like we should all read it. And I'm not saying he was wrong, but 3 of those 11 companies are on that slide I mentioned as being obsolete or irrelevant. And the reason for that is, what was successful yesterday is not successful today and into the future. And we have to look into the future. And that's where innovation comes into play.
And I mean, you've been doing this for over 20 years, I think. So, I mean, how do you, if you cast yourself back a couple of decades, I mean, how has things changed? Is it more systematic? It's a broader basis of change. Is it moving faster, or is it just everyone's more aware of it because you've had a couple of big companies that have had their Kodak moments? I mean, how would you characterize that journey, if you like?
Well, I think I think the biggest, so change has always been there. And if you talk to, my parents who are baby boomers, they'll tell you they went through massive change. And if you talk to my great grandparents, they'll tell you they went through massive change. So I think change has always been there, but I think the speed of it has accelerated and the accessibility has accelerated. Technology today has allowed many of us to compete against large companies and things that are already in the marketplace in a way that I don't think we would have been able to 20 years ago. I'll give you a quick example. It's kind of personal. So my dad, do you remember the yo-ball, the yo-yo that always came back?
Yep.
Yeah, so that was my dad. He was an inventor.
Okay.
And he created the yo-ball. In order to get to market, he had no choice but to make a deal with Toys R Us. They were it in the marketplace. And it took months upon months to get those onto the shelf because shelf space is so, it's so coveted. It even is today. Today, if I have an invention, first of all, I can get it made a lot faster and a lot cheaper. And second of all, I can bring it to market in a million different ways and have just as much success as going with the big retailers. So it's not that we have changed today that we didn't have before. I think what we have is an accelerated pace and a much more even playing field, which allows that competition to get in very fast.
And I think when we spoke last week, Tamara, you were saying how you started off your career by sort of almost going into large companies and giving them ideas, and you very quickly sort of evolved to actually teaching people how to come up with those ideas. So I mean, how what does it look like now when you go into what's lesson number 1 in terms of teaching people to fish, if you like, versus giving them the fish?
Yeah, it was a painful lesson. All those millions of dollars spent on consulting for most 99% of that work to go nowhere. We always laugh. It's on a PowerPoint deck in some closet somewhere in some company. Yeah. And then frankly, every time I'd go and I'd say, can you show me all the past PowerPoint decks? Because I'm pretty sure the answer is already in there. We just have to find it. So that was my old world. And as you and I talked about, what I realized, the real power is teaching people to be innovative, because when you've got a company that's got people who are empowered and have permission to be innovative, you can tackle those ideas. And the reality is, ideas that are born inside have a higher chance of buy-in and traction. I can come in and I can help facilitate that conversation, but your people have the ideas. They're just not tapped into. And as a leader, I'm spending money, resources, and time on my team. I want them to be innovative too. So what it looks like now is a couple things, really. So one is, over this 20 years of work and research, we created this proprietary assessment. It's the only one that can tell you your unique innovator archetype. And we use that as the starting point, because what we find in organizations often is that innovation is siloed. It's either, Mark, because he's cool and he's got a podcast and, he's got a blue streak in his hair. I don't know if that's true for you or not, the blue streak, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Or it's the innovation team or the creative team. And what that ends up creating is a one-way tennis match. Hey, I'm innovation, I'm over here, but you're not responsible for it. But I got to lob that ball over to you because you're the brand manager, you're the business unit manager, and you've got to take it to the finish line. And they don't want that, right? They don't want an idea they're not a part of. So with the IQE, the Innovation Quotient Edge, the assessment, that's our starting point for empowering and making accountable everybody in the organization to be innovative. When that happens, the entire performance of all of the teams rise. It's not just one person who's responsible, it's everybody who's responsible for innovation, and they see how they can do it. And from there, we work on creating a culture of permission of innovation, which is far beyond just like, yay, thumbs up, you can do it. And if we have time, we can talk about what that looks like.
Yep.
And then from there, we've got this online platform called LaunchStreet, where companies, organizations, teams will subscribe to. And they really use it in two ways. So yeah, it's a library of all these tools and resources. One is every week we're pinging you to keep it top of mind, because let's face it, right? Once kind of work gets in the way, it's so easy to just head down. I can't be innovative, although we know we should be doing it. We get, I don't want to say lazy, but we get stuck in our old habits. So I want to ping you constantly to be like, oh yeah, I could use this tool and do it smarter, not harder. And the second part is what our clients tell us is, oh, I've got this meeting coming up. I've got a situation or scenario. I'm going to dig into LaunchStreet, find the tool that works for me and apply it in this situation.
Lovely. So, there's a huge amount in there. So let's see if we can back up a little bit and unpack this. Because, you use the word empowered, and I think that means that an individual who perhaps might not necessarily see themselves as innovative, by using this tool, you're able to remind everyone or help everyone understand that innovation comes in all shapes and sizes, and you don't need to be the most creative person in front of a whiteboard to be innovative. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So, oftentimes the person who's seen as innovative is the one who's kind of like wild and crazy-eyed, big brainstorm ideas, likes to use sticky notes, for their organization and use scented markers on blank pages. And that's all fine. That's part of the process. But innovation isn't about the outcome. It's about the process. It's about tackling things differently. It's about seeing new angles and then applying those thinking and putting them into action. And that can be from everything from your internal processes and how you make those more efficient to that big kind of, game-changing so-called idea. So innovation needs to be everywhere in your organization. If it's only in one or two places, you're leaving money on the table and you're leaving opportunity on the table. And I'll just give you an example, Mark, for you, because you took the assessment and I know that you're an inquisitive futuristic. Those are your two power triggers. So there's 9 power triggers. It's the top 2 that make your unique innovator archetype. So what that tells me, and I heard it the first time you and I talked before you took the assessment, is you innovate by asking questions. You recognize that innovation is in the questions, not the answers. So you'll see this in a team a lot. There's one person so this is totally you, Mark, right? Like, I'm done. I'm like, okay, we're good to go. And you're like, wait, I've got 3 more questions. Hold on, I'm not quite done yet. And the person on the other side is like, really, Mark, come on, like, don't you get it? But what you're really doing is innovating by asking those questions. And inquisitives in particular, people like you, and I hear it when I was listening to your podcast, I could totally hear it in how you ask people questions. You're really good at pulling back the layers of assumption because you don't take things at face value. So you just did it to me like, hold on, Tamara, let's unpack that, right?
Okay.
Where other people might have moved on. So that's innovative. That's hold on, I want to dig a little deeper and I want to think differently. So when you've got an organization of people who are all a little bit different in how they innovate, and you show them, hey, Mark, this is you. Like, you're an inquisitive futuristic. You ask a lot of questions and you're thinking about tomorrow's solutions, not today. Now you know how to do more of what works for you. And I, as your coworker, I understand the interplay and I can respect your perspective and how you do it because I understand that's different from me. Because, I think we all kind of bought into this myth, and I know I did. And that myth is that, if we just, I don't know, we were fearless. And if we stepped outside of our comfort zone, we'd all be innovative. But we're not all the same. We don't think the same. So we need to recognize that we do it differently. And that's really empowering for people, whether it's, administrative staff or the, innovation new product person.
Well, and as you said earlier on, this is about co-creation. So if everyone feels they've got something to say about the subject, and it's, it comes from what's unique about their makeup, which, as articulated in the Innovation Quotient Edge, that means that everyone participates. And as you said earlier on, a co-created solution has got far more likelihood of success than something that was dreamed up either by consultants or by the person with the blue streak in the hair, right?
Right. That's exactly right. So I'll give you the shortened version of this just because, it's the essence of time. But I did a huge baby care project for Johnson & Johnson years ago. And I was so frustrated because I was standing up there with my team and my client, and we had worked for 6 months really pushing the boundaries of what was possible. We had talked to dads first time in J&J history when we had done this. And the ideas were incredible. They came from the consumers and the people on the other side of the big wood table in that CEO conference room with, oil paintings of CEOs past. And by the way, Mark, none of them were smiling at me, which made it very awkward.
Not particularly diverse either, I should imagine.
No, God, no. But, none of them were buying into the ideas. In fact, they shut most of them down. And I was so angry on that ride home, but that was the tipping point for me when I realized, wait a minute, it's not the ideas that are the problem. It's that we're this outside in approach. Yeah. If those people are jaded, of course they're jaded. They weren't along for the ride for us for 6 months. But if I could have incorporated them and shown them how they innovate, we would have had a very different result.
So I'm going back again now, Tamara, I'm afraid, because I'm going to do what you told me I do, which is go back. So you said, firstly, empowered. The second thing you said at the beginning of this, when I asked you, what do you do? What are the one of the 1-2 things? Is, you give people permission to be innovative. So here's the question. What does a leader today, what does that look like in a Johnson & Johnson or in a Procter & Gamble? How would they act with their teams in order to give permission to be innovative versus the position, what you just painted in the boardroom of the of J&J a few years back? What's the leadership style look like today?
Yeah, so there's 3 things I want to make sure, so I was just taking notes, I want to make sure to hit upon. So one is, and I was just having this conversation with an IT company that I work with, and I was having a conversation with a couple of the leaders, and she said, in the past, the challenge that we've had is we as the leaders have come together and said, we want a culture of innovation. We recognize its importance. We're going to get on board, and then we're going to tell our teams that's what we're going to do. And you can hear it in how I'm explaining it. Yeah. It fails because it's top down. And what an innovative leader today who really wants to create that culture and embed it recognizes is they've got to provide resources and they've got to provide that permission across the entire organization, up, down, and sideways on that ladder. It is not enough for the team leader, business unit leader, president, CEO, whoever, to stand up in the town hall meeting or in the Monday morning conference and say, all right, guys, we have got to be more innovative. We're getting killed over here, or we see this coming. That's not enough. It's got to be something that's given to and provided to everybody, which leads me to my second point, which is we got to move beyond lip service and give people tools. We have accidentally shoved people's innovative side into the drawer, and then we suddenly expect them to pull it out and use it, and it's dusty and it doesn't work as well and it's a churn. So what do people do? They shove it back. Yeah. So we got to make sure it's across that entire part of that ladder, and we've got to make sure that we move beyond lip service. I think oftentimes as leaders we fall short. We say it's important, but we don't give people the tools. We assume they know what to do, but they don't, and they all do it differently. So now again, we're saying, hey, I recognize you all do it differently. I'm going to give you tools to make that happen. And the third thing is, this is one where this is one where you see a lot of kind of accidental mistakes happening around here. So if you want a culture of innovation, here's the one thing this is kind of the tactic I would say, shift your thinking on and shift how you do immediately as a leader if you're listening to this. If you want a culture of innovation, you've got to reward behaviors, not outcomes. The outcomes are going to happen anyway. You're going to succeed. You're going to fail. That initiative's going to work. That initiative's not going to work. Sometimes completely outside your control why things succeed or don't. And we have this mistake of, I'm like, oh, Mark, hey, you know what? Congratulations on taking that risk and going for that new client. You nailed it. We are going to have cake and beer on Friday. Let's all give Mark a round of applause. Like, that's what we do to success. And then if you failed, I go to you and I go, hey, Mark, look, I know you tried. I'm really sorry it didn't work. So we're going to have a long conversation where we painfully go over every mistake that was made and why this failed. And then we're going to put it on the failure shelf. And we're going to, take all those lessons learned and pretend like we love our failures, but we don't, right? No, none of us love our failures. So if you're on the other end of that conversation and it's a 50-50 crapshoot, are you going to go for it? Probably not. Most people don't, because they know if they succeed, they get cake, but if they don't, they get the failure shelf.
And executives really struggle with this, of course, particularly in public companies, because failure isn't something that they like to talk about, and in many respects they'll get killed by the markets if they have a big one. So I mean, this is really hard on all sorts of levels. Any companies? I mean, I know that I think it was the Ben and Jerry's. I mean, they had this sort of. They literally had physically a graveyard of failed concepts that people can go visit, where they'd have these ludicrously strange kind of recipes of ice cream which just crashed and burned. But any companies that you've worked with that do this really well and that really make a celebrate the process and the learning versus harangue the failure.
Yeah. And here's what I would say. Let me preface it with, rewarding behaviors is things like, Mark, hey, I just wanted to say thanks for speaking up in that meeting. I know all 9 of us were headed in a different direction, so it took a lot of guts and risk to sit up and say, I don't agree, and here's why. We're not going to head in your direction, but I appreciate you doing that. Because you want more of that. You want people speaking up more. That's going to lead to innovation. Hey, Mark, thank you so much for submitting that idea. We'll see what happens. We don't know what we're going to do yet. Or, hey, you're on milestone 2. We don't even know if this is going to work or not, but we want to honor the fact that you are taking this smart risk and doing something differently and trying something different. So that's really what rewarding behavior. It's way back before the success or the failure. I've seen some companies do it better than others. It is a struggle because the failure and the success is the public face of it. But, there's a catering company here, Footers Catering, a large company that does an incredible job of that. They really celebrate the effort that their employees put into it. It's not the outcomes they celebrate at all, actually. It's the effort that they put into it. And that's really where a company needs to focus.
Yeah. And what does it, I mean, this is a very sort of difficult question to ask about, but what does it feel like wandering the halls of that kind of organization versus an organization where, and what do you pick up? Because I mean, having 20 years of doing this, I guess you've probably developed a sort of sixth sense as to what kind of culture you're walking into. I mean, anything that stands out that characterizes that kind of organization?
Yeah, I think a couple things. From a energy perspective, when you walk in, you can feel the energy, can't you? It's buzzing. You know a company that's really working together well and one that isn't. And the one that's buzzing, there's a lot of conversation happening. There's a lot of dialogue. There's a lot of what if conversations happening because people aren't afraid to hold back. It doesn't mean they're going to do everything. I always laugh. I have a popcorn bucket on my desk where every idea goes into because I don't want to lose it. As ridiculous as it may be, you just never know where it's going to go. Yeah. But it doesn't mean I'm going to pursue every idea, but I want to honor the fact that I have those ideas. So you feel that sense of buzz, you feel that sense of energy. I think the other thing too is, on the flip side, the organizations that aren't, you feel the play it safe, you feel the behind closed doors conversations because people are frustrated. People want innovation. They want to be able to think differently. I mean, it's human nature for us to want to create things. That's part of our species. Mm-hmm. So when we don't have that, you start to see the trickle of the undercurrent. You know that undercurrent where it's like people are saying things that they should say, but not what they want to say. And you can feel it in an organization.
Yeah, no, it's very tangible, and I guess I'm just interested in how you'd vocalize that, because I mean I agree totally.
Yeah.
These are characteristics of many organizations, and that's the concern that that's one of the reasons I'm doing what I'm doing, is to actually get some of these tools and some of these insights out there. So I mean, in terms of when we talked the other day, you came up with this, you shared this term which I thought was really interesting: compounding innovation. Can you say a little bit more about that, and why you think it's an important sort of concept? What does it look like in organizations, for instance?
Yeah. So compounding innovation is the idea of, just like money, compounding interest, of leveraging the power of compounding innovation. Little moments and bits of innovation every single day that over time add up to incredible ideas and opportunity, game-changing exploration. The reason I think this is so important for us as organizations and as people is twofold. One is, it is really hard to get your team to suddenly make a sharp right turn. We got to be way over here. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, couple things happen. And this was articulated to me by another client of mine who's the global digital marketing firm up in Seattle. And they were saying, the challenge is, I come and I go, oh my God, guys, this is it. Like, we're going crazy. We're going bold. And everybody looks at their watch and goes, until the next big thing comes along.
Yep.
And they try to wait it out. So we don't want to do that to our people. We don't want to give them that sense. And we have done it to them of, this is just the next big thing. And on top of that, let's face it, being a disruptive, innovator, game changer, like that's hard. That's hard. If you're not in that space every single day, that's really hard. But how easy is it to go to your people and be like, hey, how about we just do little bits every single day, just little tiny elements? When an organization leverages the power of compounding innovation, those little moments of innovation every single day across everything that they do, the power of it becomes exponential on the back end, versus the pain of trying to suddenly switch on that light switch out of nowhere. And that's where we start to feel the resistance, and that's where we lack a lot of buy-in. And, the reality with innovation, half of the challenge is the ideas and the kind of new thinking, and the other half is the buy-in and traction. When you think of it more as a culture where it's about compounding innovation, that's what you're looking for, you get incredible buy-in from the beginning. People, I heard this great quote, I think it's from the Heath brothers, their book. I can't remember the name of the book, but it basically says, people don't mind change, they mind being changed. When you do compounding innovation, you're not trying to change someone. They're the ones doing the change, and they're doing it little bits every single day. It's incredible. Like, you have, let's say you have 50 people on your team. Let's say you have 10,000 people. It doesn't matter. Can you imagine what happens when all of them are doing little bits of innovation every day?
Yeah. No, it's almost like the Kaizen, of the sort of, I don't know when it was, the 50s or 60s, a constant, never-ending improvement. The Japanese were experts at a number of years ago. And it's the same concept, that step by step, if everyone's doing a very small piece of it, over time the results get absolutely extraordinary.
Yeah, exactly right. This came up because I was meeting with my financial advisor, and he was talking about the power of compounding interest, and it clicked. And I was like, wait a minute. Hold on. This is exactly what I'm trying to say with innovation and with people and with cultures and changes. If we just did it a little bit every single day, it adds up in an incredible way.
Yeah, absolutely. Just going forward now to LaunchStreet. I mean, you talked about some of the kind of situations that you that you make up, that you where some of your clients, entrepreneurs find themselves in, and and where they're able to download certain tools. What are the most common situations where people reach for the toolkit, reach for some insights from you? I'm interested in how people are using the materials in, once you've left the room, as it were, and left behind this service. What are the big problems?
Yeah, so I'm going to tackle it from both the leadership perspective and kind of quote unquote frontline staff perspective. So just kind of from all angles. So because the leaders get this kind of captain's log information too, of ways that they can continue to foster it, as well as the team getting robust tools and access. So from the leadership perspective, what I'm hearing a lot of, and how they're using it is, hey, how do I spend 5 minutes at every staff meeting integrating this into it? Yeah. So we have tools for that. We have podcasts for that. We've got downloads for them for that. But it really is about how do I integrate it so that it's not this spend an hour training? How do I get my team to make sure they log on during work hours so they don't feel like they have to do it after hours? How do I create a challenge that keeps the momentum going this month, for the month of February, so that we keep that energy and that momentum, because we don't want launch and abandon, which is the other thing that I hear from them is, how do I avoid launch and abandon? So we have tools for that as well, things that help them keep that momentum going. On the other side, I think from the frontline staff perspective, it's a little bit of a range, but the top things I hear are, one is, I'm coming up and getting the same ideas in this meeting. Like, give me a tool that's going to help us think differently about it from the beginning. We have a tool called Play on the Fringes, which is all about going wide and then bringing that back in. How do I get the team thinking on a different path? We have this tool around asking open questions, asking different questions. The one, it's funny, we tend to ask the same questions over and over again and then wonder why we get the same answers over and over again. So we have a tool for that, because again, I don't want to give lip service and assume you automatically know how to do that, right? That takes a skill to know how to ask different questions. So I give them that tool. And then the last part that we hear, and we have a whole section under outcomes of this for this, is how do I get people to listen to my ideas? All right, I've got this idea. I put it on a PowerPoint slide, yet I'm not getting any traction. So what's the we created this whole thing around the language of innovation, because it really does have its own rhythm and its own method. And if you can figure that language out, you can get more traction. So we have all these tools around how to get people engaged in discussing your ideas.
Yeah. I mean, that's such a big one. I mean, I do quite a lot of work with entrepreneurs, and the number one issue often is how do I get my idea? How do I manage stakeholders such that they take the idea as seriously? And it's a huge issue. And you're absolutely right. It's getting the right language and speaking to them using words and definitions that they understand, that the audience understands. And often we think it's a great, sexy idea that's enough and that's going to win people over, right? I mean, that's a big mistake.
Oh my God, I'm 100%. I could not agree with you more. You are 100% right that the idea, no matter how sexy it is, just isn't enough. And I think the mistake that we make is we stand up there, we have this incredible idea, we present it, and I say, hey, Mark, here's my coffee mug. It's, keeps my coffee warm, blah, blah, blah. What do you think? And when I do that, I force you into an up or down vote. You either love it or you hate it. That's it. That's the only choice I'm giving you. So I'm not bringing you along for the journey. And in fact, most of us will poke holes in it because we're humans. That's what we do. We're born to be skeptical. So we shut that traction and that buy-in out. And one of the videos and one of the tools that we talk about is switching that, kind of letting the idea stand on its own or forcing people into an up or down vote, into asking open questions like, okay, here's my idea, Mark. What would you do to strengthen it? And ending on those type of questions. What holes do you see and how would you fill them? The analytics in the room are the best. The ones who generally are the yes butters, I think they're fantastic. We're just not leveraging them. So I don't like the whole only surround yourself by yes and people. The yes but people have a lot to offer, but we got to figure out how to get them into solution mode. So for them, and I know this because I'm married to one who every time I come home with an idea, he's like, hole. And I'm like, So I learned with him, I say, so what holes do you see and how would you fill them?
Yeah.
And now I'm using him in a great, in the way that I need him, which is to make the idea better.
Yeah, exactly. You've engaged him in the right conversation. Absolutely. So I mean, one of the things, Tamara, I mean, we touched on the IQE. Now, what I'd like to do, if it's okay, is to make this available. Can we have a link? Can we put a link in the show notes for the audience to run this test? Is that doable?
I'll give you the direct link and we'll put it in the show notes where they can go find it and take it. I'd love to see what your makeup of your audience is. In fact, one of the things that we can do very easily is then we create heat maps for organizations to say where their buckets are, every organization, every industry has different patterns of how they hire and who they hire. And it's really interesting to see where there's kind of some strength and maybe where there's some holes.
Yeah. And because, I mean, in here, there are also, to your point around strengthening, I mean, there are some exercises to strengthen your muscles, and there's some tools that you make available, which I think is, in the spirit of empowering people not only to get self-aware as to what where they are on this heat map, if you like, but also to figure out how to actually what can they do more of and what can they avoid doing what they can do less of to strengthen themselves in this area. This is quite a powerful concept, I guess.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I believe very strongly, as we were talking about, you can't just give lip service. I can tell you how you innovate and you can look and go, oh my God, that's me. I am a collaborative. I do pull, disparate pieces of information and pull them together. And now I want you to take it to the next level and actually put that into action. So how do I, it was really important to us that we give tools that allow you to do that very easily, because once you start getting into the habit of it, it becomes easier and easier, but it's a habit. And most of us are sabotaging ourselves and actually working against our strengths, not actually for our strengths. And, it's just something we've got to deal with over time.
Yeah. But as you say, these are habits, and you touched on one, the way you ask questions and the type of questions you ask is a hugely, not only to other people, but also oddly enough to yourself. I mean, it's a huge liberator, and it really does unlock an enormous amount of creativity and forward momentum if you can train yourself to ask questions either as a colleague or as a leader of your people.
Yeah, questions are a really powerful tool. And you, Mark, because you're an inquisitive, you naturally do and think that way. And for the rest of us, I'm actually an experiential risk taker. Those are my two power triggers. But I've learned the power of questions for myself and for others because, it's garbage in, garbage out. Our answers are only good as our questions. And if we can change up our questions, it'll automatically put us on a new path without having to work that hard. We just got to start with different questions.
I mean, it's interesting that our show that goes out today is with a guy called Kevin Cashman, and he did some research on 1.5 million senior leaders from his database of his company, Korn Ferry. And I mean, it's fascinating research. There's one thing that the most successful leaders do 4 times more often than average leaders. It's ask questions.
Wow.
So in other words, they ask 4 times more questions than the average leader, because as you said, I mean, our predisposition is to actually tell people or give opinion, but actually by creating this space and pausing and stepping back and asking the question, you unlock that. You're moving into co-creative space. You're unlocking that, and it's just a fascinating piece of research because they connected that with financial performance of those companies as well. It was an extraordinary insight into some of these things which are very subtle but very profound as well.
Wow, that's amazing. I'm looking forward to A, listening, and B, seeing the research. I mean, it's, you say it out loud and I go, well, of course, right? That makes so much sense. But it's a lot harder to do than we think. Yeah. And, one of the things I kind of coach teams on when I go in and do a kickoff session or, a keynote or whatever it is we're doing together is I like to challenge them that in that moment where you think you get it, that where you go, okay, yep, got it. To actually stop, take a deep breath and ask 3 more questions, especially in the moment where you're 100% certain that you know exactly what they're talking about. Because more often than not, it's not that we don't know what they're talking about, but we're not digging deep enough. And if we could dig a little bit deeper, we could have a much more meaningful conversation, which is going to lead to a more meaningful outcome.
I mean, I'm as you say that, Tamara, I mean, I'm struck by something. I've done some work with an individual who does a lot of reviews for boards, for corporate boards. And she says that the thing that makes a difference between an outstanding non-executive director, board member, and just an average one is the outstanding ones ask questions, and they ask a question and they ask it 3 times. Now, any board member, and I'm on the board of one company, it's very easy to ask one question, and then the CEO will sort of kind of, he'll nod patiently, he'll give you an answer. It's quite hard to ask a follow-up question, right? Because you're putting them on the spot. And also you might be actually exposing yourself to the fact that you don't know a huge amount about the business, which as a board member versus but I mean, if you're on a number of boards, there's only so much you know. But the really good ones are the ones who are prepared to hold on to it and ask a 3rd follow-up question, because that really gets to the nub of the issue and it changes the dynamic on the board. And again, it's a different spin on the questioning, but it's a very, very profound insight again from this individual.
Yeah, that's incredible. And I think that really does apply to leadership. I mean, when I think about the great leaders I had, they really pushed me and asked questions and dug and dug. And, when I'm on a call with a potential client, someone who's considering me for a keynote or considering their organization or team for LaunchStreet or taking the IQE across their organization and using it in some way, I make sure to ask those questions that sound really naive. I'll ask things like, well, when you say innovation, what do you mean? I just want to make sure I'm not being assumptive, because the reality is my definition and yours is probably different, but we take those things for granted. When you say you want your team to be empowered, what do you mean by that? Because I know my definitions, but I don't know theirs. And for me to really understand what's needed for them, which may or may not be what we offer, I need to dig and challenge those assumptions. And my favorite question to ask is, that's an interesting question. What makes you ask that?
Yeah.
So before even answer, which sounds like a punt in a lot of, and sometimes it is. Sometimes it's like, I don't know how to answer this. But the reality is I don't know why they're asking. And if I know why they're asking, I can be much more thoughtful in my answer.
Yeah, yeah. Lovely. Great stuff, Tamara. So before we wrap this up, we'll put some of these things in the show notes, specifically your details. Now, I think you're on Facebook, you're on LinkedIn. Where else can people get hold of you?
Yeah, LinkedIn, Facebook are probably the easiest, but if you go to LaunchStreet.com, so GOTO LaunchStreet.com, you can subscribe there too and kind of stay in the community and stay in the know. And through there, you can get to the Innovation Quotient Edge and everything else too.
Super. And for those listeners, Tamara nailed me in terms of having seen my results beforehand. But it's a great tool, and it really does. Again, I think it's a powerful tool because people don't. I think it's the first one of its kind that I've seen, which actually gets you. It's a very tailored way for interpreting what does innovation mean to you as an individual, which is which is an important insight, because a lot of this starts with self-awareness, right?
That's so right. And, there's 1,000,001 personality tests out there, and they're all great. But what we're interested in is helping people unlock their greatest competitive edge, their untapped power, which is the innovative mind. We all have it. We just have to use it.
Yep. Now, I call it the unfair advantage. And I guess everyone's is going to be different, but there are probably some patterns as well that emerge, as you say. You look at organizational heat maps. Three questions I sent across, Tamara, in advance. First question, what have you changed your mind recently about?
Yeah, so, this kind of goes to this entire conversation we're having, and I think I alluded to it earlier. I truly used to think that if everybody just did what I did, they'd all be innovative. I really believe that. I believe that, you just have to be fearless. You just have to step outside your comfort zone. You just have to challenge yourself. It's all about taking a risk you're afraid to take. And in the 20 years of work and research, in the last, especially 3 years where we really put this all together, it blew that assumption out the door. I truly used to believe it was all just, we all did it the same way. You needed to be funky and cool, and that's how you were innovative. And, as I said, what I learned is that being innovative is universal, but how we do it is unique to each of us. And that actually really rocked my world and changed how I did things.
Yeah. And what was it what caused that? Was there a specific event or conversation that shifted that? Or was it more evolution?
It was a little bit of both. So there was the J&J story I told you where I was like, what is happening here? Like, how come I can't get buy-in for my ideas? Don't they get it? That was one of them. The other one was a client called me up and said, hey, Tamara, listen, I love all these ideas, but your real power is helping me be innovative and be different. And, and every time I would talk to people, they'd say things like, oh, Tamara, I'm not the innovative one, but so-and-so down the hall is, or, oh, I'm not. And I just kept seeing this belief that you had to have the blue streak. And then I looked at myself and thought, well, hold on, I don't match that. So something's not right here. And it just kept sinking into me that things were off. They weren't in alignment of what I thought I believed and what I was seeing in the marketplace. And I think over time it turned into that.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, it just shows how easy it is to, we adopt a mindset and unless we continue to challenge our assumptions and ask ourselves the difficult questions, we can end up in the place that is not where we want to end up, of course.
Right. And I'd see it fail over and over again where people, I'd see people go into organizations and talk about, what would you do if you had no fear? I'm sorry, but I hate that question.
Yeah,
it drives me bonkers because that's not the right question. That's not the challenge. The challenge is, how do I unlock what's natural to me to begin with that I'm not leveraging for the greatest advantage for myself and for my work and for my life? So, every time I would see that, I would just roll my eyes, yet I was buying into the myth. So,
okay, good stuff. Second question, what do you do to remain creative and innovative?
Yeah, fortunately for me, I'm in the business, which kind of helps. But there's a couple things that I do. One is I work really hard to collect a lot of dots. So I like to go wide, not just deep. So I will read a magazine on, BMX bike culture. I will, watch a YouTube video on how to knit, which all sounds kind of ridiculous. But what I've really discovered over time is, having all those little dots allows me to connect things in new and meaningful ways. So I like to go wide as I possibly can. And I like to explore. I'm a very curious person. So I want to know a little bit about a lot of things and then kind of play on the fringes and bring that back. I'm always in life, always asking, what can I learn and what can I apply to my world? I think you and I were talking about offline. I go to CrossFit religiously. I'm totally an addict. And if you allowed me another hour, I would talk your ear off about it. But I'm also, while I'm, getting fit and healthy and doing a workout, I'm also going, what can I learn from this experience to apply to my world? I think that question has the power to make us more innovative more often without a lot of work.
Yep.
It's so, because we're all humans. We all have emotional lives. Then we walk into work and we shut all that out, but we have all this experience to pull from. And the third thing is you'll often see me when I'm not kind of in my introvert mode, talking to strangers. You just never know what you're going to learn.
Great. Yeah, and it is a very powerful question. What can I learn from this? Because it gets you into irrespective of the situation, there's always something to take away from it. And it's, in all sorts of, all walks of life, I find that's a very, very powerful and liberating question. And final question, I mean, to what do you attribute your success in life? I mean, what are the specific skills or habits or mindsets that you've mastered that really have made a difference?
So the first one, try not to laugh at me for, but it's really quite true. I have this mindset, and I 100% believe, I've grown up believing this, that there are rules out there and that they're all for you guys, but they don't apply to me. The rules have never applied to me. And maybe it's I was born in Israel. Maybe it's kind of being an Israeli. It's a little bit of, the culture and the mindset. But I think because of that, I've been able to circumvent some maybe rules that shouldn't have even existed. I've been able to leap where other people have taken baby steps because it just never occurred to me that rule that was going to hold me back or force me to do a certain process applied to me. So I don't do it. I think that's probably one of the biggest ones, as funny as it kind of is. But, and the other thing I'd say is, and this is so simple, but I have an incredible willingness to ask. So people will always say to me, well, how did you land that client? How did you get on that media channel? How'd you do this? And my response is really underwhelming to people. It's, well, I asked. I'm just not afraid. I have this kind of joke, and I have this little sticky note on my thing that says unapologetic selling. Yeah. That's my motto. And I don't see anything wrong with that. We're in business and I have something of value and I want to provide it to you. So I'm not afraid to ask. And surprisingly, people really are afraid to ask for that sale, that connection. I'm just not. So
the rules didn't apply to you. No, it's great.
No, they don't.
Lovely. No, I get all sorts of answers to that question. I've never had that answer, which is lovely. It's nice and very liberating, of course, right?
Yeah, my husband always laughs at me for it, but because we'll go to some restaurant, there'll be a long line, and I'll find a way to circumvent the line in some way. Just the rules don't apply, and it's very liberating. And there are times where there are rules that need to be there, but the reality is most rules that we are following are other people's way of doing things that we've picked up. And they don't have to be our way of doing it. And that's what I've experienced time and time again with the so-called, rules that kind of slow us down and hinder us. Yep. And if we can get over that mindset that they have to be there, you're right, it's liberating.
Yeah, super. So Tamara, it's been great to talk to you. I would love maybe next time we get into CrossFit, because there's some interesting stuff around the business model there we can get into. But I think we're a little bit out of time now. Really appreciate your time. I'm sure the guests, our listeners enjoyed it as Will enjoyed as much as I did. Many thanks. And if you're ever over in Europe, specifically Switzerland, look us up. You'll find that actually rules do apply to a lot more people in Switzerland and other parts of the world. But
it's a cultural thing sometimes.
It's a cultural thing, yeah. But it's liberating. It's a liberating discipline as well, is how I look at it. That's my positive way of looking at it.
Well, and the flip side is structure and innovation, rules and innovation are not mutually exclusive. One can foster the other. That's a whole different conversation. But, you don't have to have an either or mindset.
Absolutely. Wonderful. Well, many thanks for your time and have a great day.
Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed this. And I'm looking forward to seeing the heat map of your audience. We'll pull it together.
Wonderful. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Bye. Hi, and welcome back. A few things that struck me listening to this again. Firstly, that simply giving a company ideas from the outside is not enough, and that we need to create ownership of these ideas and reward the innovative behaviours within an organisation, as well as empowering everyone to utilise their innovation potential. And this was a lesson that I learned several times over during my career, particularly more recently at Syngenta. And secondly, that an innovation culture creates a space and the resources for innovation and effectively grants permission to all levels within the organisation. And the resistance to innovation at different levels is a theme that's been discussed by last week's guest, Jenny Fielding, as well as by Dave Bruno of UBS Wealth Management Innovation Labs. And I seem to remember Lisa Bedell, who's been on the show a couple of times, talked about the main blockage for innovation being in middle managers, and that a leader's number one job is to break down the barriers. And thirdly, acknowledging that different people approach innovation in different ways is firstly very, very empowering, because it demonstrates or it makes a point that everyone is capable of innovating in their own way. It's not just a preserve of a certain type of person. Indeed, it's the kind of person that tends to get almost like deified in the media. It's not the preserves of that. Everyone can innovate. And this enables us to employ this concept of compounding innovation, which takes a step-by-step approach to innovation, treating it rather like a bank account that steadily grows. And this concept of compounding interest, well, actually, I think Einstein referred to compounding as the eighth law of nature, an extremely powerful concept. And I love the way that Tamara has brought this into the world of innovation, the idea of compounding innovation. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the show. Plenty in the show notes for you to have a look at, as well as to learn more about LaunchStreet, Tamara's fascinating organisation and set of resources for entrepreneurs and innovators alike. Pop over to our website, www.innovationecosystem.com. Feel free to leave a message in the show notes. And until next week, have a great week.